Hi everyone, and welcome in the second chapter on our syllabus, which deals with the past perfect in its two forms, the simple and the continuous. After talking about the past perfect, we will move to indirect object and the position of indirect object. So, starting with the past perfect, let's focus first on the form of past perfect simple. It consists of the subject and the auxiliary verb, which is had, and after that we have the past participle form of the verb. Let's have a look at the following example. Joe and Pet had written. In this case, Joe and Pet are the two subjects. Had is the auxiliary and written is the verb in the auxiliary form. And if you look at the positive, negative, and the question forms, I had spoken, I hadn't spoken, had I spoken. This is how you create a question or change your sentence into the negative form. Okay. When it comes to let's have a look at the meaning or when it happens. I mean the past perfect. If you look at the following example, the meeting had already started by the time I arrived. If you look at this timeline, we have the past, we have now, the present time, we have the future. These two crosses indicate that there are two actions happen in the past. One of them is the red one, which happened at 8 o'clock, and the other one is in the blue, which happened which happened here at 8:15. So you see that the one in the red happened before the one in the blue. Therefore, usually the action which happened first, we always make it in the past perfect, and the more recent action is in the simple past form. So the meeting had already started. This one in the red had already started, which indicates the start point of the meeting. By the time I arrived, this is the time when I arrived to the meeting, and I noticed that the meeting had already started. Therefore, to say it again, two actions, both of them happened in the past, but one of them happened before the other. And the older one, is going to be in the past perfect, and the recent one is going to be in the simple past. Let's have a look at another sentence. I'm mentioning here again that in the past perfect we have two events, one of them happened before another. By the way, we usually use before and after in both the past perfect and the simple past. For example, you look at this sentence after. If you have after in your sentence, it can be followed directly by the past perfect or simple past and then the past simple or simple past in your sentence. Okay? And if you have before in your sentence, it's going to be followed by simple past first and then the past perfect. And you see that the order is different here. And with after, we have the past perfect first and then simple past. With before, you have the simple past first and then the past perfect. For example, look at the example. After I had done homework, comma, you have to put a comma here, I watched TV because it indicates the order of two events. Before I visited my friend, I had eaten dinner. These two words, after and before, you will see that they indicate the sequence of events. And with these two words, you can use the form of your verb either in the simple past, both of them, I mean the two actions are both of them in the simple past, or you can use one of them in the simple past, which is the older one, of course, and the other one is in the one of them in the past perfect, which is the older one, of course, and the other one in the simple past, which is the more recent one. Okay, another example. After I had the school, يعني I left the school first, then I met my friends. Okay, two actions. First of all, I left the school, and then I met my friends. Therefore, the one with the had is the first event, and I met my friends at the second event. With before I met her, okay, I had seen her somewhere. So which one is the first action? Seeing her somewhere is the first action. Both of them are in the past actually, and the second one is meeting her. So here the order of events is changed. Okay, and this actually, for example, look at this thief. This is the timeline. This is number one, number two, and this is the time when we are talking or when we are saying the sentence. The first action, okay, someone broke into our house. The second action, we arrived home. Okay, and now we are reporting the events. We discovered, why do they put it here, number three, before noun? Because it is also our discovery or our realization is also in the past. We discovered that someone had broken into our house. Okay, and then before our arrival, we discovered that someone had broken into our house. In this case, we see that the past perfect, we use it to show that the first event finished before the second event happened. I do hope that this is clear. It can be clearer if you give more examples. Now let's move to the uses of simple past perfect. The first case is when we need to express time relationship. When you have two events and you want to indicate which action happened before the other, like I said earlier. However, the close marker doesn't indicate this relationship. Usually this happens when your close marker is when. When you have when, let me just highlight it. And this relationship is the close marker does not indicate this relationship. Okay, and usually, again, your close marker is when. Let's have a look at the following example. You have the same sentence, okay, and you are going to a meeting or to the restaurant, and you have a friend who ordered pizza either before your arrival or when you arrived. Let's have a look. This is now. This is the current moment of speaking. Let me just make it yellow so it will be clear. This is now the current moment of speaking. And we have Taylor who ordered pizza and I arrived at the restaurant. If you look at the picture of the pizza, it happened earlier before my arrival at the restaurant. Okay, when I arrived at the restaurant, Taylor had ordered pizza. My time expression or the tool of my time or the close marker is when. Let's compare this sentence with the other one. Okay, I have the picture of pizza and this is now the current moment of speaking. Then, excuse me. And these are the two events which are before the picture of pizza. I arrived at the restaurant. Taylor ordered pizza. Both of the two actions are in the past and they are both before the picture of the pizza. Okay, when I arrived at the restaurant, Taylor ordered pizza. This shows that the moment when he arrived at the restaurant, he ordered the pizza. Therefore, if you see that in the first sentence, without the past perfect, Taylor had ordered pizza. Without this, it will mean the same meaning and of the second sentence, and they will both indicate that the order of pizza is the same time of his arrival at the restaurant. Therefore, we need the past perfect in the first sentence to show that ordering the pizza happened before my arrival at the restaurant. Like I said, when your close marker is when doesn't indicate the time relationship. يعني شنو? It doesn't indicate which action happened before the other. We'll show this clearer when we compare the past simple past with the past perfect. Okay. Second usage. We usually use the past perfect to reported speech. Sometimes when somebody says a sentence or make a statement in the past simple tense or the present perfect, and you want to report, يعني you change it from direct speech into indirect speech, احنا نسميه reported speech. When you report that speech, you change it into the past perfect. Let's have a look. If your original sentence, which is the direct speech, is in the simple past, for example, she drove home, okay, and you want to change it into indirect speech or into reported speech, she said that she had driven home. You change it into past perfect. This is the first case. When your sentence or when your direct speech is in the past continuous, you were sleeping, and you want to change it into the reported speech, it will be past perfect continuous. He had been sleeping. Okay? When your direct sentence or your direct speech is in the present perfect, he has just arrived, and you want to change it into reported speech, he said that he had just arrived. It will be the past perfect again. If your original sentence is in the past perfect, she had had lunch at 2, you change it into it remains in the past perfect. You don't make any sort of changes. Okay? This is how the reported speech is changed in different forms of the verb. Third usage. When do I use the past perfect? Usually the past perfect is used when you want to express wishes and real conditions, and usually these wishes are about the past. Okay, if you look at this picture, this is a person. Uh, he's thinking that he would be happy if he finishes university. Okay, and this action now, as long as he's remembering events, these events are in the past, and he would be happy if he finished university. Look at the picture that he's happy, saying that I finished university. Okay, but the problem is he didn't finish university. So when he expresses his wish, he would say, I wish I had finished university. So indicating that he's not happy because he didn't finish university, and when he want to talk about his wish in the past, I wish I had finished university. The second case is with the conditions. Okay, before talking about our example, let's just make a quick review about the 4 conditions of if clause. You remember that this is the probability of the happening of the event, and this is the conditional sentence, and this is the example. Okay, you remember that. I'm saying it fast because you studied this already, just making a quick review. The first case is the zero condition when the two parts of the sentence are in the present. And this happens at any time. Usually it refers to the scientific conditions or whatever. If you heat ice, it melts. So there is no condition, and both of them are in the simple present tense. When the probability is 50%, and this is the first condition, if it rains, I will stay at home. And this refers to the future. The first one is the simple present tense, and the other one is with will, referring to the future. The other one, when we have a slight probability of the happening of the event, which we call the second condition, if I won the lottery, which is in the past, by the way, this is also referring to the future, but it's not probable to happen, I would buy a car. Here, instead of will, the first part is in the past, and the second part using would, and, which is the past form of will. The third one, which is our focus, is the zero condition in a way that there isn't any possibility for the action to happen. احنا عادة we use the past perfect, okay, and would have bought a car. If I had won the lottery in the past perfect, I would have bought a car. Same like here, if he had studied hard, he would have finished university. We are talking about this person. If he had studied hard, he would have finished university. So this is the third usage of the past perfect. Now let's compare the past perfect with the simple past. Like I said earlier, the sequence of events is not indicated using the close marker with the past perfect. Therefore, we use the past perfect to indicate the sequence of events. Let's look at the sentence. Jack had spent 2 hours on the problem when he gave up. We have two events, spending 2 hours on the problem and giving up. Okay, my close worker is when. Therefore, I need to indicate which action happened first. Is it giving up or spending 2 hours on the problem? In this case, I need to make the past perfect spending 2 hours on the problem to indicate that it happened before giving up. However, the sequence of events, we use it, we show or we indicate that sequence of events using the time expression, which is before. يعني before indicate which action happened first, whereas in the first case it is the tenses of the sentence that shows the sequence of events. So here, in the second one, Jack spent 2 hours on the problem before he gave up. But like I said, تذكرون قلت إنه before we can use it both with the past perfect and we can use it with the simple past. So here, the usage of before is to show which action happened before the other, and we don't need to make one of them in the past perfect. This is a desire. If you want to make it in the past perfect, one of them, it's totally up to you, but it is sufficient to show which one happened before the other using before. For example, Jack spent 2 hours on the problem, which is the first event, before he gave up, the second event. Okay. Again, now let's move to then. Then also helps in showing the order of events. نرجع نشوف هنا the past perfect. The sequence of events is reflected in the verb tense. The first event is expressed in the past perfect. This is what we usually say. George had lived here for 6 months when his cousin Nick arrived. Okay, So the first action is living here for 6 months. This is the first action. And the second action is the arrival of Nick. Like I said earlier, because when does it show which action happened before the other, therefore we need to make one of them in the past perfect. If you have then, it's okay. You can use both of the two actions in the past. You don't have any problem because then shows which action happened before the other. George lived here for 6 months. Okay, then his cousin Nick arrived. Already, we use already with the past perfect. Why? Remember we said that already is one of the time expressions that we use with the present perfect. We also use already with the past perfect to indicate the order of event is unexpected. Okay, يعني when you something which is unusual or unexpected, we tend to use already. Already, let's look at the sentence. Professor Baker had already dismissed the class when he announced the exam. Okay, we use it with the past perfect. With the simple past, the time relationship of the two events is shown by the time word after. Just like before, just like then, after also indicate which action happened before the other. But remember, students, after the order of the events is revised. يعني شنو? Professor Baker announced an exam after he dismissed the class. In this case, we after دائما the second action comes before after. Okay, so it's always sometimes confusing or problematic for students which action to put before after and which action they put after. So the second action comes before after, and the first action, dismissing the class, happened first, and then he announced the exam. All right, and you need to pay attention with after. Before and after, you need to pay. We'll talk about this in the lecture. We'll give some examples related to after and before and show how we revise the order of the events when we have these two tools. Fine. Having talked about the simple past perfect, let's talk about the past perfect continuous. When do I use the past perfect continuous? It refers or it indicates that there is a past action. This action started in the past and it continued to happen for a while. Then another action, okay, interrupted that past event. يعني we've got two actions, both of them in the past, like it's similar to the past perfect simple. However, the first action continued for a while and it was interrupted by the other action which is also in the past. Let's look at the form of the past perfect continuous. The subject had been, and then the verb with in the ing form, and then the object. If it were in the negative form, the subject hadn't been, and the verb in the ing form, and then the object. If you make it in interrogative form, you bring the auxiliary at the initial position before the subject, had, and then the subject, been, verb with ing, and then the object. And here are some examples. You had been running, you hadn't been running, had you been running. Okay, when do I use the past perfect continuous? Let's talk about it in more detail. Like I said earlier, it's the duration of an activity. Duration, like it is the يعني continuous activity, which is in the past, okay, and it was interrupted by another activity, and which is in the past as well. When you have two time expressions in this past perfect continuous, okay, one of them, two times expressions are required. You need to use in the sentence of the past or in the sentence that precedes or follows it. For example, the first time expression expresses the duration of the activity, and usually we use since or for, and the other time expression which indicates the time or when that event is interrupted, the activity. Let's have a look at the following sentence. The students had been writing in the class for 10 minutes. This is the first time expression, and this is the one which we use with the present perfect, past perfect continuous, and it is followed by the second time expression. Here we have when, and this second time expression is followed by the past perfect or the simple past of the verb. In this case, say it again, we use the past perfect when you have two events. One of them is continuous, had been waiting, and this continuous event was interrupted by another action, and usually we make it in the simple past. We need two time expressions. The first one indicates the duration of the activity, and the other one indicates the interruption of the first activity. Right. Let's compare the past perfect and the past perfect continuous. The past perfect, let's have at the following example. George had lived with an American family for 6 months when Nick arrived. We have two events. One of them is living with an American family, and the other one is the arrival of Nick. You see that the first one in the past perfect, and this suggests, it might suggest, by the way, students, it's not for sure, but it might suggest that George changed his living before the arrival, okay, before the arrival of Nick. However, George, in the other sentence or in the other part of the column of the table, George had been living with an American family for 6 months when Nick arrived. This might suggest that George will continue living this continuous event, living with an American family, and it was interrupted by the arrival of Nick. Therefore, there is a possibility that George might continue living with the American family. And by the way, here there is a note saying that both sentences can be used to express the same situation. Yani, both of them might indicate the continuation or the end of the event. All right. We also have the past perfect in the second row. Professor Baker had already dismissed the class when he announced the exam. Here, we use the past perfect to express a completed act. يعني an act finished and cannot be expressed in the past perfect continuous. Why? Because this is an action which happened and completed, then another action happened and completed. Therefore, we cannot express this form or this condition or this case with the past perfect continuous. Again, we have a note here that saying that the verbs of mental state, verbs of condition or perception tend not to be used in the past perfect continuous. And here is a list of we call them state of verbs. We have these ones of thought, believe, think, agree, disagree, doubt. We have these ones. This is to make them clearer for you. You can see them, the state of verbs example, the ones that are related to emotions, senses, and possession. Now, I finished the first part of this chapter. Let's move now to the second part of the chapter, which is the indirect object. In this slide, let's have a look at the types of verbs. We've got two types of verbs, the transitive and the intransitive ones. You know that the intransitive ones are the verbs that do not take object. It rained yesterday. And the transitive ones are the ones that take object, and in turn they can be either with one object or with two objects. The ones with one object, Susan took my car or my car keys. So Susan is the subject, took is the verb, my car keys is the object. The ones that take two objects, the first one usually after the main verb is the indirect object. احنا نقول it is the one that receives the action. They charged me $150 for 3 hours. So me is the indirect object and 150 is the direct object. Okay? Right. These indirect objects can either be followed by preceded by 2, can be preceded by 4, or not to be preceded by any هاي العلامة. You see this mark refers that they are not preceded by any tool, neither 4 nor 2. So indirect object might not be preceded or might not be introduced by a preposition, or they might be introduced by 2, they might be introduced by 4. This column is very useful. In the 2 column, this is the same column which is in your book. We have the verbs admit, announce, describe, whatever. The ones that are either preceded by 2 or not to be preceded at all are here, and we have 0. We only have 3 ones: ask, charge, and cost. They are not preceded at all. Or we have the ones that are preceded by 4 or not to be preceded by any tool or a preposition. And finally, we have the ones that are preceded by 4. Okay, by the way, I just want to mention that for these ones, not to be preceded at all or to be preceded by 4, the ones that are preceded by 2 or not to be preceded by anything, you will see if you have 0 preposition, the order of the direct object with the indirect object will be changed. Let's have a look. Now, we are talking about the position of indirect object. This position, as I was saying earlier, it is determined whether it is introduced by preposition or not. And it is determined as well by the nature of the direct object. What do we mean by the nature of the direct object? This will show us shortly. In the first point, if there is no preposition that introduces the indirect object, remember students, it's always the indirect object which is preceded by the preposition. Okay? Keep this in your mind. If there is no preposition that introduces the indirect object, usually the indirect object comes before the direct object. Right, let's have a look. Professor Ali, which is the subject, asked, which is the verb, the student the time. Where is the direct object? Where is the indirect object? The indirect object, احنا قلنا, is the one who receives the action. Okay? So the indirect object is the student. And يعني to whom the action happened. The direct object is the time. What did he ask? He asked the time. Whom did he ask? He asked the student. Therefore, we don't have a preposition here. Which one came first? The indirect object came before the direct object. In the second case, when the direct object is introduced by 2 or 4, or when the direct object the simple noun phrase, the indirect object follows the direct one. In this case here, when you have these two prepositions اللي أخذناهم earlier in the previous slide, 2 or 4, if they come before the indirect object, here they swap their position and the direct object comes before the indirect object. Okay, Professor Ali announced the grades to the students. We have the verb announce. It takes two objects. What did he announce? He announced the grades, which is the direct object. To whom did he announce the grades? To the students. Yani, who received the action is the students. And because we have the preposition to, therefore, my sentence is, the indirect object came after the direct object. And by the way, when you have a simple noun phrase, يعني شو a simple noun phrase? It's a noun which is preceded by a determiner. The student, the child, we call this a simple noun phrase. Okay. هاي النقطة اللي that I'd like you to focus on or to pay attention to. If your direct object is a clause, which means يعني if it consists of more than one word, okay, or if it contains a clause, يعني if it has a clause, usually the indirect object comes before it. Let's have a look at the following sentence. Ahmed told. Ahmed is the subject, told is the verb. Whom did he tell? He told Sally. What did he tell Sally? That he had lost his key. That he had lost his key, كل الobject. And it's a clause. Your object is a clause. Now we call it noun clause, which you will study shortly. We call this a noun clause, and because your direct object is a clause, is a noun clause, therefore it came after the indirect object. Okay, who's the receiver of the action? Sally. What did he tell her? He told her that he had lost his key, the direct object. Usually this happens with the reported speech when you report somebody else's speech and your direct object will be as a clause. Okay, moving now to the last part of the lecture, which is the verbs, and these verbs are somehow confusing. Verbs will say, tell, talk, or speak. What each one of them take, whether they take direct object or not to take a indirect object, sorry. With say, usually say, it introduces a direct or indirect quotation. Just like when we say, he said that Susan said that she had lost her key. Susan is the subject, said is the verb which we use with the reported speech, and that she had lost her key. We don't have indirect object, we only have direct object. It can be used with indirect object. You can say, Susan said to her mom that she had lost her key. Okay, so usually it introduces direct or indirect quotation. With tell, you need to have a direct object. Why? Because you need to say to whom you said the word or the sentence. Sally told her friend that she had lost her key. Sally the subject, tell, and it's obligatory to use the indirect object before, because you need to mention to whom you told the action or the sentence. That she had lost her key is the direct object. If you have talk refers to a conversation between two individuals, and here we don't need a direct object. They talked until the teacher arrived. It means they chat with each other till the teacher arrived. Sometimes it has indirect object and it is introduced by two. They talked to their teacher. Okay? It has an indirect object to their teacher, which is introduced by two. If you have speak means, if it means to greet, okay, يعني to greet or to salute somebody, then it is followed by indirect object, and this indirect object is introduced by two. If you want to speak a particular language as well, it is followed by direct object, or referring to formal situation, speaking referring to formal situation. Let's have a look at these three cases. يعني it comes with three cases. First of all, to greet. Second of all, to speak a particular language. And third of all, it refers to formal speaking or formal يعني speech by president, for instance, or whatever. George speaks to his students. George, subject, speak, object, main verb, sorry, to his students. It is followed by indirect object, and this indirect object introduced by two. The dean spoke at the club. Okay, the dean and speak at the club. It refers to speech in a formal situation. Ali speaks three languages. What Ali speaks, it speaks three languages, which is the direct object. I know this lecture was somehow long, however, it covered all the topics which are in your chapter, and that's all for today. Thank you very much for your listening.